And we're live. Good morning, everyone. Back for our usual chat. Got some interesting things to talk to you today, but we are in pre-show at the moment. So if you don't want to watch all of this stuff, because I'm going to be here for another 5 minutes or so, maybe a little bit longer, just depending on how many people log on. Skip to the timeline down below, which will give you a complete breakdown of the whole day. I'm not having a beer this morning. It's a little bit cool outside, although it's a lovely day. What is the temperature? It's actually 18 degrees Celsius. I probably should have had one, but I've got a Milo, so it's a chocolate drink this morning. Nice. So how is everyone? Hopefully you're all staying safe out there. I'm going to open up the chat in a minute just to see who's here that we can say hi to. So if you are here, please join in on the chat because we love to see everyone. I love Hero said beer time. So let's go over anyway and check who's here. Like I said, we are in pre-show. So it's just basically to see people that are here. Eli is here. I'm expecting this streamed in 8K with zero buffeting. Yeah, good luck with that, Eli. Gilbert said, let's party. Jib said, laugh out loud. Jib's also saying hello to everyone. Hero says, beer time. Yeah, I haven't got my beer today. I was sort of debating whether... It's getting earlier now with daylight savings. See, summertime it's easy for me because it's an hour later. Actually, it ends up being 2 hours because you guys drop back and we move forward. So where it's now 20 past 10, it would be 20 past 12 in my summertime. So it's getting earlier and earlier with daylight savings. So it might be for the foreseeable future, unless I do some later live broadcasts, that I stick with the coffee and the Milo until summer comes around again. Then obviously I'll be straight back into the Corona. I miss that. Who else have we got down here? Panda says, I'm not here because I'm a ninja. Photomix says, yay. Anthony, good morning. Sean says, I'm here. G'day, Altric. Good to see you here as well. Michelle, hello, David and everyone. Gilbert's here as well. So Gilbert's up nice and late up there. What time is it over there? It's around about 1:20 in the morning, Gilbert. You should be in bed going night-nights. Aaron's also here. Big thumbs up. Yeah, we missed Aaron's show. Guys, just to explain what happened, we missed Aaron's show on Wednesday due to the fact it's so low on numbers for stories at the moment. So we decided to miss it. Now, what we're going to do with Aaron's show... We're going to make it sort of very topical subject. When I say topical, we're going to give you more subjects on the show with Aaron, the behind the photo and video. We should probably call it that, really. Where we're going to discuss things like how to use sliders, all these other things that, correct for color, cast, all these other things that are sort of giving you tips and tricks about how to become a better videographer or photographer. So we've sort of been nutting down with us together what sort of stories we can give to you. So stay tuned because I think it's going to be a really exciting show. We want to take that show more away from the hardware side of things and go more into the actual using the gear. And that's why I think that's important because there's not much out there in that regard where you're getting two people just talking and giving tips and tricks about how to make things look better. So stay tuned for that. We'll be back next week. I think it's Tuesday US time, Wednesday here Melbourne time. So we will be back next week. All of you, good morning. Shakar said, like I said, we're just going to do this for a few minutes. Don Gordon, hi from Canada. G'day, Don. No, this is my son's business, Aaron. Four Seasons Concreting. My son owns a concreting business. So this is his mug. So I thought that I'd use this today. So it's called Four Seasons Concreting. So if anyone needs any concreting local, my son has a great business. By the way, too, new grandfather, lovely baby boy, Mitchell David. So they did name the baby after me. That was yesterday. Actually on the mother's birthday, so they both share the same birthday now, Chantel and Mitchell. So it's really exciting time for us all. Cliff said, hi, David from Philly, 1920 time Central USA. Anthony, add some Kahlua. You don't know, I might have put some in there, Anthony. I love it. Hello, David from London. Vintage is also up nice and late. Barry also said good morning. David saying, hi, guys. Sony a7siii expected 8K RAW. I'm going to talk about that in one of the stories today. Happy hour for everyone. And what was that one? Every hour is a happy hour, Hero said. I love it. Sleep is when you're dead. Exactly right, Gilbert. You got plenty of time to sleep, haven't you, when you're dead? Panda says, look at the sky. No, it's a bird. It's a plane. No, it's a Canon teabagging Sony for the first time in 4 years. Laugh out loud. Oh, dear. Nivak said, would love some tips and tricks section with you and Aaron. Yeah, well, that's what that show is going to be about, and we're going to sort of talk about things like that. We will still talk about gear sometimes, obviously, but we'll also be showing and giving tips about how to do things and stuff like that. Leslie said, hello, David and everyone. Hope everyone is feeling good. M. Gris said, hello from Indy. Congrats, Aaron said, thanks, guys. Everyone's saying congrats, Grandpa. Yeah, I know, I love it. I'm an old fart, I am. I like saying hello, everyone, as well. So we've got a stack to talk about today. There's heaps. I'm going to start out with talking about the Canon EOS R. And it's an interesting story I saw on, I think it was Petapixel, actually. No, DP Review, talking about the long game. And what's been happening, and I thought I'd share that with you, and then we'll also go on to things talking about the April 20th or 30th announcement now. We'll discuss that a little bit, and some other news about camera sales and things like that, because they're particularly gloomy. But I thought we'd also talk about that and discuss that as a group as well. So we've got some quite interesting stuff to discuss today, actually, so it should be really good. So let me just put down here, show start is 6, I'm going to put it 7 a.m., 7 o'clock. So let's get this party started. If you're looking for some crazy, I'll tell you everybody's standing in a line for the water slide. You can come on over, we can take the roller coaster. And you know everybody's looking for a ride in the water slide. Well, good morning, everyone. Back for our usual Sony Alpha news, rumours, and other sort of news that's coming around. There's a bit of Canon stuff in there today. But some interesting stories too about camera sales, and we're also going to discuss things like the April the 30th announcement as well. So we've got plenty to discuss. I just said to everyone that I've got my son's mug here that he's now given me. This is his business, 4 Seasons Concreting. Cheers, Damien. Now, I thought that I'd start today with the Canon stuff, and a lot of people, it's interesting, because a lot of people have been saying they don't believe it's true. I know Gilbert, he might even chime in on here, is adamant it's not true until he sees a working version. But I found an interesting article talking about this on Petapixel, on DP Review, that we can discuss about what they think may have happened with Canon. Because it's an interesting article. I was also discussing it with Daniel in the photography videography school. There was some whole comments put on there about it, and I thought we could also discuss it there as well. But what I wanted to sort of say to people is, I know I've done it as a Sony user, and I've talked about, and I'm going to talk about it shortly. The next story actually is the Sony a7S, what may happen there in regards to that, and that Sony may do an announcement on April the 30th. As a Sony group, we all go crazy whenever Sony sort of announce something, but I've noticed a bit of negativity there. I'm not having a go at anyone, but I've noticed a bit of negativity there about Canon and stuff like that, which seems to me the stuff that they were saying against Sony users when we were all switching as well. At one point a couple of years ago, everyone was switching over to Sony, and there was no sort of bad vibes about that happening, apart from Canon. People were saying, Sony people were mad for doing that. Now, I've noticed the same thing's happening with Sony users now. They're starting to bag people that are thinking about switching back over. It's interesting, the whole photography community tends to be very incredibly fanboy based. And I don't think I really like it. And I'll explain a couple of reasons why. That I think that the gear is just there to be used. And this is the thing that I really understand. I am a Sony lover and I'm not going to switch. I may buy the EOS R when I've got some money if Sony don't answer it. But I'm not going to switch over. But even if I was going to switch over, I wouldn't expect people to carry on and go crazy about, yes, it costs this much money to do that. We all did that. We all did that when we switched from Sony. I lost a lot of money when I switched from Nikon to Sony. And then at that time, everyone was bagging me from Nikon because of what I did and things like that. And now we're doing the exact same thing to people that are saying that they might switch back to Canon. And I think it's a really bad thing that we tend to do as a whole community. We tend to love the gear that we have, which I completely understand, but then we tend as a community to bag the other cameras that are out there. Like Fuji people bag Canon, Fuji people bag Sony, Sony bags Canon. And look, I like a little bit of friendly banter, but sometimes I think it gets a little bit out of hand where people get nasty, they get irky, and that hasn't happened in the photography videography school because I wouldn't allow it. I would just delete the comments anyway. But I have seen it where people tend to start to bag it just because it's almost like fanboyism, and I don't think it's a really healthy thing to do. I think everyone should be just hoping that this is true. Because if it is true, boy, is it going to push the industry and the market. Now, there's a couple of things that I'd like to say about this is that we all win from it. So this is one thing that you should try and understand, guys, is that if Canon does produce this EOS R5, we all win as a community because then Sony have to do better, Nikon have to do better, or they're going to go broke. That's one way of looking at this. I also don't believe that there's no way that Canon are now not going to produce this camera, because if they did, they would now be the laughing stock of the industry. And this is the problem. So if Canon then didn't bring this out and it was crippled all over the place or whatever, they would be the complete laughing crop of the industry and they would basically be destroyed. Because for one, I would completely go after them as a number one thing as well. And I'm sure all the other YouTubers now that are saying that wow, what this camera will be and all that sort of stuff would also go after them. So I think, and I just said it's human nature. We are tribal people. People stick to a side and defend it. It is what it is. It's like every facet of life: sports, cars, religion, politics, etc. Yeah, and I know. I mean, we have that here. What we have with Holden and Ford. People always go against each other. But sometimes people are a little bit hypocritical in the fact that they're now bagging people saying they're going to switch to Sony, whereas they did that exact thing by switching from Canon to Sony. And it's hypocritical. And I'm not really comfortable with it because I just think we should be looking at the gear as just something that we use. I mean, if I found that I had something that fitted my need today and it caused me to sell what I had, if there was a real need of it, I would do it in a heartbeat if I thought there was a need to do it. Because for me, the gear is only a tool to get what I need. It's not, I love Sony, but it is still only a tool to get the images that I need to get. So, you know, if I thought something was better out there, I would buy it. But I'm not going to switch because it would cost me too much money to do that now. I've done it once and I'm not prepared to lose that sort of money twice. But it might be that I do get a Canon EOS R5 as a camera just to shoot video, because it obviously has the features that I haven't got in Sony. Unless Sony answer that, and I'm hoping they say do it, an A7S, which I'll talk about in the next story. So I just thought it was interesting to do that. But what I thought we'd do is we'll look at this article because it may give some things, because people are saying, how is this possible? You know, how on earth could they have made this exceptional leap or generational leap against what other cameras are out there? So let's have a look, and I'm just going to put the time down, 14:50, and we can check out that what we see in here, because this is an article, and I'll leave all these links down below, and you can have a look. But this is an interesting one because they said the article is titled Canon EOS R5, and it's says the long game ends with a big leap. And it says down here that, I'm not going to read the whole thing because I'd like you to read the whole thing, but there's a couple of things that I thought I'd bring up to you that may answer some questions about how Canon could have done this generational leap, and I thought it was an interesting discussion. I should move that camera over. It's saying basically they had this yearly cycle that they had where Canon would upgrade. Now they are I think they're saying that they're one of the only camera manufacturers out there that do produce their sensors and have to make all their money off the sensors that are there. So unlike Sony sell the sensors to everyone else, and that's a massive business for Sony. So it's really good for Sony, in fact, that they can sell their sensors to say Nikon, to Panasonic. There's the camera sales that they can do, that your mobile phone sales and all that sort of stuff. Well, Canon really only use their sensors for themselves. So this is an interesting thing, and this article talks about that. And like I said, I'm not going to go through the whole thing because it will bore you to death, sort of reading about how they will do it. But they're saying it's difficult to overstress how much of a technical change it is to capture and record 8K footage. Just 4 years ago, virtually every camera maker we interviewed said that 4K was really difficult because of the heat generated and the process, and there are many models that stop recording or become very hot if they are shooting for extended periods. Canon is promising a camera that can capture 4 times as much data from the full width and its sensor while still being able to run its dual pixel AF in parallel. So it's saying the EOS R5 disclosed specs suggest a leap forward in Canon's semiconductor design. And then they talk about this in detail, about this sort of stuff. But they're saying we also don't know the camera's full specs yet, but it all points to a radical improvement in sensor and processing technologies. Now, when you start to read through this, it then says that they may have deliberately held back when they released the Canon EOS R, and they're saying because the sensors are, they have to make money back on that R&D, they had to use the sensors over and over and over again, which makes sense to me in the fact that they haven't got that development like Sony have, because they're only using them in-house. So they had to sort of use them over and over and over again. And so the sensors that were, say, in the EOS R were basically the same sensor that was out from a number of years ago. And that's what they're talking about in this article. So it's really quite interesting to have. Gilbert, yes, they do. Does anyone have the PC to process 4K? If you go to, I'm just trying to think, Max Urov, he showed a laptop that could do 8K RAW. I watched his video yesterday. It was I can't remember the brand, but if you go to Max Urov's channel, he'll show it. It was a laptop that could do 8K RAW with multiple processors on top of it, and I think the laptop was $4,000. So yes, they're available now, and he showed that actually working. He was showing 8K RAW footage actually working. So yes, you can, Gilbert. So this is the interesting thing. So they've got to use that sensor over and over and over again. And that's probably what they did with the EOS R. So let me just go back to this news story down here. And it says, and this is where we've seen Canon specs fall behind. This need to crop the 4K video was off the pace when the 5D Mark IV was launched in 2016. Sony offered full width 4K sensors, capture frames then, and that's because they were, like I said, using these sensors that they'd had earlier and earlier, repurposed on and on. Now it says, so what's been going on then? And it says here, so why had this company with a history of innovation dropped so far behind its rivals? And they're talking about why had Canon dropped so far behind its rivals. And they're saying while it sources a 1-inch sensor and smaller sensors from other companies, Canon makes its own APS-C and full-frame sensors and generally hasn't made them available to other rival camera companies. This means that the Canon has had to recoup its R&D costs entirely on its own. And so that's what they're saying. So they had to recoup those processes of R&D. That obviously creates an incentive for Canon to keep using the same chips as long as they can. Now, this is where it starts to get interesting because it says here that Another possibility is that Canon has been keeping this know-how for its more profitable pro video users, holding the main EOS R line back to avoid cannibalizing the Cinema EOS sales. And I've discussed that before, and I was wondering whether Sony may be doing the same thing there, that they may be holding back due to the fact that they were trying to protect their high-end Cine cameras, or Cine cameras. In an environment where large batteries and built-in fans are the norm, meaning that there isn't the same pressure on them to be super efficient in the main EOS cameras, because they're saying that they were making so much money on the high-end cameras there. So I'm not sure what we've seen. If anything, it's just likely that the EOS R5 is benefiting from the lessons that Canon learned through the process of developing the Cinema EOS line. So what they're saying is here that they're now using, possibly, all the benefits and research that they've been doing into their Cinema line of cameras into the EOS R line. And it says playing the long game. And this is the interesting thing. It says, instead, I wonder whether Canon made the decision to step back from the constant 2-year development cycle of sensors and processors that other camera manufacturers build their model ranges around, and instead decided to conduct a longer-term project to reclaim the technological lead that it had previously enjoyed. So in other words, what they're saying there is that they were willing to sacrifice sales and technology in the earlier things like the EOS R camera line, why they were researching this completely new EOS R5 sensor and processor that's become now available, and they were using all of their Cinema line cameras as the technological sort of advancements to get to that stage, in other words. And it says, there are perhaps parallels with the way Canon approached its switch to autofocus back in the 1980s, seemingly content to let Minolta and Nikon own the AF market, only to leap ahead with its EOS system. And that's what you've got to understand. When they did release the dual pixel AF, nothing could touch that at that stage. And they did leapfrog everyone at that point. And that's a really interesting conversation there, or comment that they've made there. So in other words, what DP Review is saying is that they've deliberately held back their R&D and allowed their sort of technology to fall behind while this was being announced. They've probably had this for a number of time, because remember, your R&D does develop over a number of period of time. But Canon does have this thing of all of a sudden coming out and blowing it away, like they did with the autofocus. Remember, they were the first really, I know Nikon, I think my first Nikon, the D90, was the first one to have video. And that's why I bought the D90 when I had it, the Nikon D90. But the video wasn't very good. The autofocus, I think, was sucked. You basically had to use manual focus. I can't remember it. It might have even been you had to use manual focus. I can't remember. But then Canon all of a sudden brought out a video camera. Wasn't it the 5D Mark I or something? Or I can't remember the model number. But I know Canon brought out the first usable digital SLR that had video workable with AF. And the dual pixel AF at that time was light years ahead of anything else that was available for doing like the focus at that time. I remember when I first went into Sony, it couldn't match what Canon were doing with the dual pixel autofocus. So they were way ahead at that time. So it may be that they've done the same thing here with the EOS R5, that they've had this technology sitting there for a while, and now all of a sudden, because of the things that they've now been able to do with their Cinema line cameras, the C300s and all these other cameras and stuff that they've had out there for a while, that they've now been able to say, well, we're now going to really push for the mirrorless market. And they've been hinting at it a long time, remember, because if you look at it, the lenses never matched what was in the body. The lenses were way too expensive for what the body was on offer. And I said 12 months ago that I thought that this was going to be the case, that the EOS R, the original ones, were only a way to get into mirrorless. I don't think they were even looking at it seriously at that point, apart from thinking about the future of the EOS R5 and the R6. But they did release the glass at that time to be future-proof. And that's what they did here, is the glass came first, and now they're going to release a camera that will meet the sort of specifications that glass can give. And I think that's probably what's happened here. And I think DP Review are right. I think what they've done here is They've held back that technology. They've allowed others to get ahead of them and basically beat them in the technology, knowing that at the end game of what's going to happen here, that they're going to be able to release something that is probably going to be a generational leap ahead of what everyone else has got. Now, I'm not saying Sony can't answer this, because I hope they can, and we'll talk about that in a minute in the next story. But I definitely, unlike some of you, what he's saying, and I've heard a lot of people, it wasn't just Gilbert was saying it, and they're fine to have their own opinion. Daniel was also saying it as well. I definitely believe that this is real because I think Canon has got too much to not have this happen. I think that in a time when this virus, we're talking about a global depression, and I'll talk about that in some of the sales soon. If Canon were to do this, it would destroy them. So some are saying it's a brilliant marketing move. I think it would be the worst marketing move in history if they're lying about what this can potentially do, because this will hurt them financially. It will hurt their reputation. Incredibly, it will hurt their reputation, and basically people would never trust them again. So I think it would be a really stupid thing to do if that's what they've done. But let's open it up to the chat, because I'm just curious to know what you guys think about all of this. I'm not going to read all of them, but we'll go through some of them. Let me just see where we were. And I still believe, like Hero's saying, under $4,399, I still think it'll be around the $4,000 mark. I don't think they can justify much more expensive than that in the current climate. But that's what I believe. Aaron said he's switching to Canon. I love it. What else have we got? See, Gilbert says Unicorn R5. I love it. Panda says David will count the money for us. Laugh out loud. I have. Gilbert says I'll behave. I promise. I love it. You're allowed to have an opinion, Gilbert. I love that aspect. Aaron said, let's face it, Canon sucks till now. Yeah, definitely. The EOS R did suck. It improved a lot, though. Like I said, it improved a lot. There's a couple of things that I loved about it when I used that one when I went to Jurven's workshop. The back screen is incredible, the way that it works. The ergonomics. I hated that little touch wheel thing or whatever it is, the sensor, but they've got rid of that. So they have definitely improved it. They also have to improve the dynamic range as well. Remember that the dynamic range has suffered compared to what Canon's dynamic range has definitely suffered compared to what Sony has. It's nowhere near it, but this new sensor may improve that. So who knows until we start to see what's actually out there. Gris said, I'm a Canon and Sony user. Hero said it's the same as the Xbox PlayStation fanboys wars. Sean says, I agree, Canon has always appealed to me. Just a Canon like an 80D is too big, but I love the function. Panda says, I have the Canon 80D and love it. James said, never understand why someone would get upset about the decision that someone else makes. I don't really understand it either, James, to be completely honest. I don't care what anyone uses. As long as they're happy with it, I'm happy. But perhaps there's not many of us feel that way. Like I've discussed with you before, I think this is probably why Sony Australia never helped me, because I always talk to you guys and tell you the truth about how I feel. And I'm not going to drink the Sony sugar or the whatever you call it, Sugar Aid or whatever you call it, because I just think that sometimes there may be other systems out there that are better. And like I said, I'm not going to switch because I'm too invested in it. But I just don't drink that aid. That I just think that sometimes you have to talk about the bad things. And if Sony bring out something bad, I do say it's bad. But some won't do that. But it's interesting anyway. I read that saying Ike was saying that it's just human nature. Chevy versus Ford bagging. As I always say, use what works for you no matter what it is, Gary said. Totally agree. Quinton said, cameras are just tools no matter what make of camera it is. I still use Canon, Fuji and Sony depending on what use it is. It's foolish to taint others for differing camera to others. Torben said, in my opinion, the Canon EOS R specs are so far ahead of its time that once they actually will be relevant in its own time, the competition will have long caught up. Oh, you're saying it's going to be a long time before it's released, Torben? Is that what you're saying? Michelle said, the Panda, I love the 80D. I borrow my cousins all the time. Paul says you use Canons and Sony. Panda said, yes, I'm also hearing that people using Sony want to switch to Canon now. Videographers will, and I can tell you that if Sony don't answer this cameras, they will lose videographers. There's no doubt about it. Because videographers, I know you always hate me talking about this. I'll thank you so much, Long Rider. Let me just mark something so I can come back to where we are, because Long Rider just gave me a donation. It didn't even ask for anything. Thank you so much, buddy. Really appreciate that. Where were we? Just got to find where... there we were. I can't even remember what I was talking about. I'll have to continue because I was excited because Long Rider gave me the donation. Use Canon and Sony. Oh, yeah, switching from Sony want to switch. Yeah, videographers, look, they will. They will definitely switch. Remember, videographers, it's not only 4K 60 that we need, it's also a higher bit rate. And this is the thing you've got to understand, that having a higher bit rate is like the difference of, say, having a RAW option in camera and a JPEG option. If you're grading your images, to have higher bit depth makes a massive difference. And also, it's a huge difference if you're using things like green screens and things like that. So they will lose people, and I guarantee Sony users will switch over to the Canon system if you're a full-time videographer. I've got no doubt about it, unless Sony answer it. What else have we got? Richard said, I completely agree with you, David. The Panda says, don't say switch, just say buy as a photographer or to professional use. Yeah, I mean, it's probably one way of saying it. But I did switch, I suppose. Like I said, I've switched once in my life. I've switched once from Nikon to Sony, and I'll never do it again. I'm too old now to do that, and I'm not prepared to lose the money again like I did to switch back over. But I'm being always totally honest with you guys that I'm definitely interested in this EOS R. If Sony don't answer it with similar specs, it might be something that I buy when things pick up. And I'm saying when. It's probably not going to be this year. But it might be something that I can look at later on down the track. So, you know, but it does excite me. I'm being honest, I am a geek. I'm a technology geek. And the technology that they're sort of announcing in that camera, if it is true, and I believe it is, really excites me. Ike said, that's because they've never switched to Sony on the inside. They only switched on the outside. If you love your gear inside and out, it doesn't matter what else exists. Maybe a good point, Ike. Time for Sony to step up their game now. Yep, it certainly is, Gilbert. Mark said, this is the whole reason why I formed a Facebook group where everyone with any camera can come into it and not get a fanboy treatment. And that's exactly what I'm trying to do in my Facebook group. Mark. The photography videography school is exactly based around that. If I saw that side of it, I would comment. And I even commented on, like I said, there was a whole post talking about it yesterday about it. And I said, guys, give the Canon users the same respect that we would want. You know, let them have their excitement. There's no reason to be negative against something like that, because what is the point of being negative, especially at this time? Like I said to them, if this was a Sony announcement, all the Sony users would be jumping up and down, carrying on like, yay, beautiful. I would be. So I want the Canon users to have that same feeling. And I said that when the Panasonic released their cameras, I was so happy for them. When Nikon released their cameras, I was so happy for them. You know, let's be nicer in this world. Not bag others. Let's let others have their minutes of happiness that we can give them without trying to be negative and always think of the negative. I'm a half full type guy. Some, unfortunately, are half empty. And that's the difference, I suppose, you've got to try and think here. That, you know, we need to stop being negative and be thankful for what we have, which are amazing cameras, but also be happy that Canon are possibly going to release this amazing thing that is going to benefit us all. Photomix says, if you're chasing specs, then you aren't really loyal to any brand. You're only loyal to what your gear can do for you. Panda Panda says, this is why article to divide the community in photography, so they don't take it seriously and only take it with a grain of salt. Casper said, I use my iPhone Pro 11 for video. Dang, it is. The iPhone 11 is incredible. I use that much stuff in America. In fact, I'm going to put a video together when I get the time of my iPhone footage that I've taken, like to show around the USA, because it's so good. And yes, Gilbert, like I said, Max Urav showed a laptop that did processing 8K video footage, raw, and he was using multiple layers and things. Aaron says his PC will do 8K. Casper said it's Canon's time at the wheel now. I almost bought the a7 III because I wanted better video specs. Nikon offers everything I could ever want photo-wise, and now the Z6, my video needs are met. Yeah, like I said, Nikon is ahead of Sony at the moment, Ike. They're way ahead of what Sony are offering at the moment. Basically, nearly everyone is. And that's the frustrating part about what Sony are doing at the moment. Mark said, brand loyalty is really silly. I pay lots of money so that the manufacturers can put their name on these products. I usually debadge as much as possible. Mirrorless MY says, we don't need 8K, it's ridiculous. Yes, but see, this is the thing I don't understand, Mirrorless. If you don't need it, don't use it. This is the beautiful thing about having this in the camera, that it future-proofs your camera. If you don't want it, you don't have to use it. Turn that off and just use 4K or 1080p. Like, coming up and saying we don't need it, it's ridiculous, is fine. That's for you though, but others would have a need for it. Remember, there are 8K TVs now. In fact, the Olympics was going to be streamed in 8K. So also, if you're dealing with grabbing stills from images, 8K would be incredibly useful. So to say that we don't need it is ridiculous. I think it might be for you and at this time, but who knows what will be happening in 2 years' time. It means if you pay that money now, in 2 years' time, your camera is still future-proofed. So this is what I always tell the people when they say, we don't need it. If you don't need it, don't use it. Just use 1080p or 4K, whatever you'd like to do. That laptop is a custom gaming PC. Yes, it was, Panda. It was a gaming PC, but they had a different video approach. Apparently, I think it was NVIDIA, brought out a driver that is tailoring it directly to doing video for video performance. So there's two different video drivers that you can add to that laptop. One was a graphics video driver. The other one was a gaming video driver. But watch his video. It's on Max's channel. Aaron's saying use proxies. Yes, you certainly could do that if you needed to. But Aaron, Max was doing it in real time, the 8K on a laptop. What else have we got? Ike said it's not brand loyalty, it's the trust and respect you'll have for a brand. Trust that your brand will provide the experience for you and cover your needs artistically. I agree. But what I'm trying to say here to you, Ike, is what do you get out of bagging other manufacturers? This is the point that I don't understand. And I know you're saying people do it with cars and everything else. I can understand that, but it gets nasty. It can upset people. And I just think the world has enough nastiness in it now in itself. Horrible things going on that we should be more positive to each other. But that's just me. Perhaps I'm just looking at things through rose-colored glasses. I mean, I don't know. What customers wish for will always play second fiddle to the profit maximization strategic plans wishes of the manufacturers, in my opinion. The D90 was 12.2. Are you talking about megapixels? Yep. The Nikon D90 was my first digital SLR that could do HD video. Yep, that's why I bought that. I jumped at that because it was the first time I could get into video. What else have we got? Hero said, laugh out loud, people are going to get an R5 and still put a $30, go 51.8 on it. Sony will answer this. You're probably right, Brett. I mean, they'll have to, won't they? What else have we got? 720p is the lowest standard for HD. Panda said 4,500 it's going to be, and I'll bet my kidney on it. Gilbert said, great marketing from Canon, and it will help them keep their users from switching to Sony and other brands. Oops, where were we? I don't want to spend too long on this, or we'll be here for 5 hours. I just wanted to read a few comments. What else? Aaron said, I can care less what other people use. I'm the same. No Sony Kool-Aid for David. I love it. Like I said to you, though, the interesting thing is the Kool-Aid. Yes, like I said, I do love Sony, but I just don't drink the Kool-Aid. I don't understand that thinking. But like I said, it might be that I don't look through things with, rose-coloured glasses, perhaps. G'day, Jerry. I'm just laughing at Gilbert saying, Aaron, you change cameras more than I change underpants. Torben said, David Osa, what I meant was, like you said, the specs is a generation ahead of the competition, but nobody needs that now. Once people start needing it, the competition will have caught up. Oh, okay, I understand what you're saying there. Jerry said that his Photomiac is right. I was Canon for decades, but now I'm Sony inside now. You are right. Henry said the R5, if specs are true, will be an amazing gimbal camera. Mark the date, November the 1st, Oastler Images show unboxing the EOS R5. I don't think so. I don't think it'll be November. I wouldn't be buying it this year, that's for sure, Jim. We've got 6 months basically without any work here, so it's going to be a while before I'll be purchasing cameras like that. That's for sure. Mark said the R5 with 1R lens could easily reach $10,000. Yeah, but that's true, Mark. But I paid $9,000 for my Sony A9. So I don't think talking about the cost is that relevant, really, because I paid that for the A9. That was 9,000 Australian at the time without a lens. So yes, it is going to cost that, but potentially. But it also depends on what lenses you have. You could use the R5 with Canon's other lenses that are already out there, and it probably will be very, very usable, because I believe using the adapter, you get great autofocus and everything else. So that could tide people over why they were, say, saving to buy one of their really expensive R series lenses. So yes, 10 grand, but yep. But like I said, I paid 9,000 for my Sony A9 when it was released. Gilbert said, if Sony was releasing the EOS R5, we would all be cheering. We would be, Gilbert, and that's what I was trying to say to people. Even if Sony doesn't release anything, just say something at least. Well, that may be the 30th, which I'll talk about shortly. Let me keep going down because I don't want to be here all day. Gerald said, I don't bag Sony fanboys. I was one for a long time. Let folks have their honest say about it. Canon always has the ability to innovate. They just need to, they're kicking the pants from Sony. Gene says, I wonder if the iPad Pros can do 8K smoothly. It wouldn't surprise me. I bet they probably could. Long Rider, Mr. Canon, send David a free R5 on loan. Oh, I wish they would. I'd love to test it, that's for sure. Where were we? Let me just keep going down here. Aaron says, yes, yeah, I get Max was doing it in real time, but if you don't have a PC to do it, 8K real time, you'd use proxies. Yep, that's right, Aaron. Gerald says, I agree that it is needed for 8K for future proofing. No one thought we would need a 61 megapixel camera, but I love that now and into the future with the 61 megapixels of the a7R4. Could Sony have a secret feature they plan to introduce in their next A7 series? Maybe built-in NDs or other things. They could. We don't know. And look, and I'll be so happy if they do bring up an amazing announcement. Trust me, I'm really hoping that Sony can do that, because it will stop me having to buy an R5 and I could just buy a Sony. I mean, to buy Sony that's my number one choice. But they just don't seem to be doing anything. I'm hoping the 30th there's an announcement that will change all of that. But at the moment, they're just not saying anything. I'm just hoping the 30th they announce something. Gene said, a camera that can handle 8K would probably provide enough processing power to handle less, and should also provide better battery efficiency. Yeah, maybe. The real problem is we don't know what it will be until it drops. Yeah. Let me scroll down because I can't just keep going on this for too long. Steve said, g'day, Steve. It would be good marketing for Canon to send you an R5. I would love it if they did, Steve. And that's about it. All right, because I want to keep going because we've already been 44 minutes. I'm going to get abused again. I want to talk about the Sony announcement on April the 30th. So let's go in here. What time we're on? 45, 20. Okay, so let's get on to the next story, which is this. Now, originally, Sony were announcing this on April the 20th. Let me just have a drink of my Milo. And I know originally Sony Alpha rumors were saying that it was going to be just a new cine camera that was cine camera that was going to be announced, and some lenses, video lenses that were also going to be announced. But now they're saying that Sony might finally give us at least a hint of how the A7S II successor would be. So if this is the case, they're doing exactly the same thing that Canon has done, and I hope all you guys that have been bagging Canon are also going to bag Sony for doing that. So that's going to be the interesting thing here. But do you believe this is the case? I'm hoping they do drop at least something. I'm from the fact that I'd like to know at least what they have in plans. Now, I think in one way what Canon have done is great because they've given us an idea about what they're going to get, and I think they hopefully will match that, or they're going to look foolish. I hope Sony also now say, look, this is the idea that we've had. This is what we're working on. We'd love you guys to stay with us and just wait for a little bit longer to see what they can actually produce. Because they're saying, he's saying in here though, that the only reliable rumor I've had so far from the April 30th announcement is about a new cine lens, E-mount lenses. So that, no news about the A7S II successor. But they're saying now they're hoping that there is now going to be an announcer. They're saying, I still have hope that Sony will do what Canon did with the EOS R5, do a sort of teaser announcement where they give at least a release timeline, and some general specs of the A7S II successor. I hope that's the big thing coming. I hope that's the big thing those influencers are talking about. But like I said, I have no solid confirmation about what this will be. And they're saying the last statements were definitely at least 4K 60, 10-bit 422. Some features will go beyond expectations. Well, who knows what that could be now because of what Canon have already announced. So I don't know how they're going to be able to do that. Apart from perhaps inbuilt NDs will be really useful. And of course, more battery power, increased AF accuracy, and many more things. So it's interesting. So what do we sort of think? Well, what would I be happy with? Let's talk about that. So if we look at the EOS R specs, I don't particularly need 8K now. So look, if Sony brought out a 4K 60 camera or a 4K 120 camera, I would buy the Sony over the Canon immediately because I already have everything I need. So I don't need 8K footage now, even though I'd love to have that ability to be able to grab the stills from those images. I could get by with grabbing stills from the 4K footage if I needed to. So I don't need the 8K footage now. So I'd be willing to stay with Sony if they released a 4K 60 or a 4K 120 sensor. And that would keep me happy and stop me from, say, buying an EOS R5. Also, so that explains that. So the 8K is not a big deal for me at this stage. The other thing too is the other part to this too is, I'm just trying to see down here, obviously no crop. I would now demand that Sony don't have a crop in any of those 4K readouts, the 4K 60 and 4K 120. I'd love them to have no crop, and I'd also love them to have audio on the 4K 60 and the 4K 120, because sometimes if you are shooting with slow motion, like that's one of the things where Canon have crippled the footage. They don't allow you to capture the audio. Well, sometimes I've had to use that footage I'm originally going to use as slowing it down. I've had to use it as normal footage and keep the audio there. So I do sort of really demand that in my cameras that I can be shooting with the audio that's linked to that slowing down of the footage as well. That's really important to me. So I would really want that as well. So if they're going to do a camera that has 4K 60 or 4K 120, I'd want it to also have audio. I wouldn't be too sad if it didn't have it in the 120. I'd like it in that. definitely to have it in the 4K 60. Now, the other thing about, what about bit depths? I think it's also important that we do have 422 and 10-bit as well. So we really do need to have that for your color editing. And just to avoid things like stepping and things like that, like in gradients. So it's important to have that as well. So if Sony brought out that aspect, if they brought out one that, say, had 4K 60, 4K 120, it would stop me from switching and that side of things. If they brought out 422 10-bit, again, that would be something that would say, well, it's just not enough for me to go up to a Canon as well. The other thing I do think it's about time that Sony should think about putting in CF Express. I know they're expensive, guys, but they're incredibly fast and reliable and things like that. So I really would like them to change the card slots. I'm not fussed about time limits on that. Like I said, if Sony only gave me 4K 60 for 5 minutes, I'd be happy with that. If they gave me 4K 120 for 3 minutes, again, I'd be happy with that because my shots are only 10 to 15 seconds. So I would be completely happy with that. The other thing too is I think it's time now that Sony fixes that horrible back screen. And when I say horrible, look, it's not horrible to look at, but if you compare it to, say, the Nikon Z series, if you compare it to the Canon R series, the back screen is terrible. In fact, the GH5 has a better screen, and that's years old. So Sony really do have to lift their game in the back screen. And also the touch interface could be way better. We know Sony can do that because they produce phones. So there's certainly areas where Sony could improve their cameras greatly, and that would stop me, say, jumping over to an R5. The main thing for me, if Sony brought out a camera that had 4K 60, I would immediately then probably not jump to an R5. As long as it had decent bit depths and other things. And I'm really hoping Sony improves the LCD on the back of these screens. So it's you know, that's probably what would hold me there. I'd love to know too in the comment box down below if you feel the same. Is that what you're missing, is the 4K 60? I know a lot of you say you don't want 4K. Well, that's fine, just don't use it. But I'm talking about the videographers here. If you are a videographer or a hybrid shooter like me, where you shoot both stills and audio, what do you want from Sony to stop you, say, switching over? When I say switching, or just buying a Canon EOS R5 to grab into your system to get the things that Sony just aren't giving us at this stage. So I'd love to know your opinion about that. Hopefully the April the 30th announcement will answer some of these. If it looks like it's good, I'll pop online live why it's happening, and we can have a discussion about what they're saying. So yeah, so that's that. Let me just quickly check what people are saying just in case, and then I'm going to go through a whole stack of things. What else? Nivak said, if Sony talks about the A7S successor next week, this is another example why competition is good for everyone, and I completely agree with you there. That is so true. I feel like the guy single-handedly created a meme. What's that about? Canon maybe has released the specs of the R5 in order to try spoiling Sony's 30th of April announcement. Well, I don't think so, Oreo, because these announcements have been around for a few months now, so I don't think that's the case. It may be that they've pushed it again because of that, possibly. But these were around, you know, like I said, 2 or 3 months ago. I mean, I was talking about this camera with Jerry when I went to the US. So they have been around for quite a while. I think Sony will pull the plug on the camera division soon. Let's hope not. Laugh out loud, they better do 4K 20 after this. Yeah, I'm hoping so too. Mark said there is no particular reason to release a new camera during COVID, as many people have not got the money now, plus the Olympics are delayed. Yep, and that's why they might be just announcements, though. That could be the thing as well, Mark. Brett said, David, only thing I want is a full touch screen, color focusing point, 6K downsampling, 4K 60, 422, 10 bits or higher. Yep, that'd be great, Brett. Where were we? It's jumped again. I'll just have to keep going down where we were. Hero said I'd use the Trump check to buy that R5. They need to make sure it doesn't overheat at all. Yeah, well, they do. But like I said, for me, as long as I can get 10 to 15 seconds and continuously, like, I mean, I don't mean you can only do 10 to 15 seconds, but, you know, I'll often do 10 to 15 seconds and then I'll have a break for a few minutes and then I'll do another 10 to 15. If it's workable doing that without it overheating, I would be fine. I don't need that camera to run continuously shooting 4K 60 or 120 like for an hour or 30 minutes. I don't shoot that way. Because it's just not the way I do it. Like I said, nearly all of my things that I'll photograph are 10 to 15 seconds. Now remember, if you're doing 4K 60, a 10-second shot becomes 20 seconds. So you get an awful lot of footage outside of that. So you've got to understand that. Most videographers only shoot for a few seconds. Leslie said full touchscreen is a must. Yeah, I think it's about time now that they definitely did that. The Sony screens definitely need fixing. They are really looking bad compared to the competition. Here I said I got hooked on the flippy screen. I'd love Sony to do that too, but I like the implementation on the Sony a7R4 now. The a6-400. I love that actually. I hated that at the beginning, but now I love it. I was wrong when I bagged that at the beginning. Oops. Where were we? Let me just scroll down here. I'm just going to see some others. Panda says, inside scoop, if you never live in Japan, let me inform you, as a former Japanese resident, the 2020 Olympics, Sony was going to announce an 8K camera. But since it's now being cancelled, they might delay it, you're saying. Make 4K 120 now, Langston said. Trev said, it's unlikely the R5 has unlimited recording. I agree with you, Trev. I don't think that's possible. It's definitely going to be limited. But like I said, to me, that's not a problem. Easiest way to deal with that heat issues. Tried to donate my blood plasma today for the China virus. Oh, that's excellent of you, Casper. The Panda photographer said, Gator, I'm not sure what that means. Joe said, what screens have 8K monitors television? There are some there now that are announced, Joe. There is 8K televisions now, but they're incredibly expensive. But 2 to 4 years' time, obviously, they will be way cheaper than that. But there are ones out there now, yes. All right, so let's go on to this. Now, this is interesting because this is talking about sales. And boy, have the sales figures dived. 57.30. Let's talk about sales because I've got a number of things I wanted to talk to you about that. In some ways, it's a little bit depressing in some ways, but I have to tell you the news. I thought it'd be interesting to look at. I noticed Sony Alpha shared this. Sony Alpha shared that the latest news, sales have dropped dramatically, and they're talking 64% sales drops on the US market alone. I mean, this is just incredible. It really is awful if you look at what the sales have dropped. Now, this was March, so it's going to get worse than this, guys. So you've got to understand this is March. This is why I can't see camera manufacturers releasing anything soon, because you'd have to be mad to release anything at this stage, I think, really, because your sales are just going to tank. Because who has got the money, really, like I've discussed this before, at this stage to go out and purchase sort of all of this gear? When you're looking at camera sales were dropped to 64% in March, April, May, June, probably until September, October, it's going to be even worse. Each month is probably going to be just as bad, or probably 80% or so. And I'll show you Canon sales in a minute just to give perspective on this. But it's terrible. I mean, they're showing it where the camera sales have dropped, and I'll share these links down below so you can have a look at them. They're saying here, this is Japan too, but no, is this US? Yeah, this is the US market. They're saying just recently BCN Ranking reported a 50% drop in camera sales on the Japanese market. Well, it got even worse in the USA. And they're saying that retail intelligence from Stackline analysed e-commerce sales across the US and completed a list of the fastest growing declining e-commerce categories in 2020 as against March 2020. And they're basically saying that the camera market has sucked. I think there was only a couple of things that were worse than the camera sales. So I think one was travel luggage and something else. It's really bad. And, there's an interesting thing here saying on why the camera business is dying but will still survive. I mean, it's really interesting to sort of look at this. So that's talking about camera sales in the US. But let's look at that. Say, for instance, I'll bring this up because I thought it's related to this. It's not Sony related, but it's talking about Canon's profits. And they're saying that Canon imaging profits were down 80% in Q1. So, like this is incredible if you think about this, that 80% in Q1, but the worst is yet to come, they're still saying. And there's a whole article talking about this and the sales figures and stuff like that, about the changes and stuff like that. Like the net profit is down 9.5%. Like these are huge drops that's actually happening in this industry. While the operating profit has dropped, it says down here, while the operating profit has dropped by a staggering 80.6%. This is despite the fact that inkjet printers are part of the business actually saw a meager increase. So office supplies obviously are going up, and that's probably what would protect companies like Canon, because things like scanners, your printers, all this sort of stuff would probably go up because everyone's working from home. And you can sort of see that in the sales that are going on here. Sorry, the office printers and stuff, the sales were down 9%. The imaging systems are down 13.9%. The operating profit is 80.6%. In the printers and stuff like that or office sales, it's plus 2.9%. Everything else has dropped dramatically. Like it really, really is a bleak time if you're a camera sales. And I'll come back to the chats in a minute because I noticed Gilbert said he's really worried about how camera stores will survive, and I agree. I am too. This is another thing as well related to this, and I'd love to know your opinion about this. I know it can be a bit depressing reading this too, but it is topical news, and I do like to discuss this with you because I love to see what current topics, I don't say love, but I'm interested to see how it's affecting everyone out there, and I'd love to know if anyone in the chat or even down below, if this is what you're thinking about as well. Is this making you think about your career that you've chosen, photography, and you may think about going for something else? Now, we were told yesterday, we were told here in Australia that travel, obviously international travel, restaurants and weddings were going to be the last things coming out of lockdown. So it looks like however long this takes, the area of things like weddings, remember that's my business, weddings are going to be the last thing to come out of lockdown. That would also be like my dance groups and everything else. So it looks like we may be more affected than anyone else out there. If you're talking, I'm talking Australia. I don't know about the US and Europe, but I know here they're talking about weddings, particularly as being one of the last things to come out of lockdown. So it looks like it's a bit bleak. So they're saying nearly 20% of photographers thinking about changing their careers, the survey shows. And there's a whole stack of stuff. Like I said, I'm not going to go through it all because you can have a read of it yourself. And they're saying here almost 80% of those surveys said that all or almost all of their jobs for April have been cancelled. Well, I have been until September. That's my wedding starting in October. So I've got nothing planned as a photographer paying until the end of September at this stage, and they may then be cancelled in October because who knows if weddings are going to be allowed after that. So I'm in that same boat. I'm in this exact same boat of 80% surveyed. Nearly 60% said they had already happened to have jobs lined up for May. 60% said the same thing had already happened to jobs lined up. Oh, okay, so they'd lost those as well. Almost 20% of those surveyed said they were considering leaving the industry due to the impact of COVID-19. So it's interesting. I'd love to know in the comment box down below whether you think if you're thinking the same. Are you thinking about having a change of career, or you're just going to ride it out and then see what happens? This is another thing as well. Now, this is for the US people here. I thought this may be of interest to you guys over there. A photographer has shared her struggle about getting access to the coronavirus relief funds. And I think from what I read, what she was saying was that the government, the US government, and please don't make this political. I don't want political comments on here at all. So if any moderators see any, just delete them. That's not what this is about. But when you're looking at this, she's saying that there was a whole stack of relief that was granted or something by the government, but then that was used up before she could even get her hands on it. So she applied and she got none of it. So this woman, like I said, I'll leave this down in the comment box down below. I should put latest news here, actually. Let me just put in 104. 104. I'll just put it around there. Yeah, so she was saying that she got none of it. It said that when the US government passed a $2.2 trillion CARES Act, I think it's put down, it was set aside nearly $350 billion to be used on low-interest paycheck protection program loans for small businesses. The loan money is meant to provide 8 weeks worth of revenue for qualifying small businesses. Money that doesn't need to be paid back if it's used on expenses like payroll, rent, and utilities. And she just said, unfortunately, the program ran out of money quickly. And as we've been finding out over the last few days, many of those businesses that were approved of these loans were anything but small businesses like Shake Shack and Ruth Chris. So in other words, what she's saying is that it's gone to the big businesses and that hasn't gone to the small businesses like this Alison Jensen Photography, which is really sad because here in Australia, like I've said to you, I think ours starts next month. I have been able to apply for the JobKeeper, which will give me $1,500 per fortnight for 6 months. And that's how it works for us. So I've just had to say that my profits had dropped by 30%, and they've dropped because they've just disappeared. It doesn't cover anywhere near what I was on previously, obviously, with weddings and all the other things I was doing. But at least it gives me enough money that I can pay for the house. I can pay whatever I need to pay, and put food on the table. Even though Kerry works, remember, we still got used to having both of our incomes. We have car loans and things like that we have to pay off and stuff like that. So at least that will give us the ability to survive over the next few months and still pay our rates and all these other things that we would have otherwise been struggling with if I hadn't have got that. So it looks like over there that Alison is saying that it's just gone to big companies like Shake Shack and Ruth's Chris or whatever that is. I'm not sure, which is very, very sad if that's the case. She said some of the big businesses who received the loans have either returned the money already, Shake Shack, or may be asked to. So I'm not sure whether that's saying some of those businesses have now had to put that money back into the thing. So perhaps others have got it. It says the House of Representatives tomorrow, after which President Trump has confirmed that he will sign it into law. That may be getting more funds into people's hands. I'm not sure. But I'd love to know what it's saying. It's just saying here, with the major industry news dropping almost daily, we often focus on the big names or the industry as a whole. After all, camera sales are down 64% in the US, and each day brings another announcement of some closure or delay. But in all of this, it's easy to overlook the many, many thousands of individual photographers and small camera shops who are most economically vulnerable. And that's the thing that you've got to understand here, is that there must be thousands and thousands and thousands of businesses like me all around the world that all of a sudden had their income completely stopped. And if the money was, say, going to these bigger companies and smaller companies aren't getting any benefit from that, like I was just showing you then, it's very, very, very sad. And, we've just got to keep in mind that people may need help out there. And that's really why I wanted to share this, to say, we are a really great community, I believe. And we should look after one another. So just be consciously aware of communication or language that other people are putting out there in case if depression and stuff like that takes a hold. So it might be really good as a community to look after one another. That's really all I wanted to sort of show with that. Last couple of stories before we open it up to... this is just news before we open it up to the chat. Tamron have now announced the 70 to 180 at Amazon. So I'll see if I can find that link and I'll stick it down below, because if anyone's purchasing that, love it if you could buy it through the affiliate link. So I will stick that down below as well. So that's now available from from Amazon now, the pre-order. If you did definitely want to get that when it's released. One other story. Oh, there's two more actually to go. Oh, three actually. I should put news up. It's not Q&A, it's news. These are just news articles, so we don't spend long on them. This is a really good app. I downloaded this the other day. Camera version 1.3.0, it now has added A9 to A9 firmware support, so you can use this now through that, and it's a great little app if you did want to do time-lapse and other things and control your camera. But for some reason, and this does my head in, and I just cannot understand why Sony does this. This is another thing I'm going to have Sony go at Sony about. Why they do not give you the ability to rack focus on the phone apps is unforgivable. I just do not understand why they do not give you that ability to do the focus. It's stupid. Sony fixed that. This is an unbelievable app, and you can't do anything with focus because they don't give people the ability to do that. In fact, he talks about that in this, that he just can't get that access. I think it was mentioned down here. He says it's incredibly frustrating the amount of stuff they've removed. I believe they also don't support the zoom control IRC. And then he's talking about this interface isn't much better, unfortunately. Still no touch to focus as far as I can tell. It's a bit trickier because it's undocumented, so I'm having to reverse engineer the Sony app and also the focus frames. So yeah, it's a bit annoying how that works. I really wish they'd fix that aspect of it. But it's a great app. If you do want to get that, it's a really good app that's out there that will let you do multiple things. Next real quick one to show you is Sony has patented this multi-lens, which is interesting. It's sort of like that Litro camera, I think, which lets you take one photo but then grab focus later on. This is the image here. I'm not sure what this is like and whether I'd use it or not. I mean, I don't know, but it's interesting anyway. So it has multiple lenses in it, so you can sort of see at the back it will take multiple shots all at the same time. But fascinating anyway, so you can have a read of that if you'd like to look at that. Don't know how useful it will be. This is another one that you might find really interesting if you wanted to look at it. This is on Petapixel. This guy, I'm not sure who it is. It doesn't mention his name. It might mention it down the bottom. But this guy has shot with every Sony lens the same portrait, roughly, about the same portrait and everything. So you can check how every single Sony lens looks. You can sort of see it here that he shows it going between everything. And you can look through and he gives a sort of brief overview of what each lens looks like. I'm not quite certain about the color rendering and stuff though, what's going on there, whether there's a reason why he's done it in the color that he's done it. But anyway, but if you do want to do that, it's really interesting to look at because he's added every single Sony lens. So that's available for you there as well, and I'll put all these links down below. And the last one is pretty cool. That Samyang have now announced the 75mm 1.8 lens. It looks really good from what I've seen in the reviews so far. So if you are after a fairly cheap lens, does it mention prices? I think it was €350 or something. I'm just seeing if the comments mention how much it was. No, I think it was around €350, I think. Anyway, it looks like it's a really good lens if you'd like a cheap sort of around the 85. Now, I still think I prefer a 85 focal length, but I quite like using my 78 on the Tamron, so it's a similar lens to that if you're looking at the depth of field and stuff. So nice. So it's a 75 1.8 Samyang lens is also been announced as well. All right, so let's go to Q&A. Let me just put that down what time we are. So there was a fair bit of news today. Let me just scroll back a bit and we'll go through some of this stuff. Let's keep going. Love it too, guys, if you could give me a thumbs up. It does make a difference to the channel as well. Oh, yeah, I was down here. So, yes, please, Sony, give us a better screen, Gilbert said. Basil said, best full-frame cameras, Panasonic series, fight me. Well, probably, they may be if you're talking about video at this stage until the camera is released. The Blackmagic's also really, really nice as well, Basil. So, I mean, Langston can comment about that as well. Still-wise, the Sony probably are still the best that are out there. Naram says, I have to use my phone as a monitor, just so I could see what I'm shooting outside. The Sony screen is so hard to look at. Full touch screen is a must, Leslie said. I got hooked on the flippy screen. What else have we got? Aaron said, I'm switching to Canon. Don't start again, Aaron. I love it. Chris said, competition leads us to better technologies and everyone benefits. Very, very true. Langston said, Sony announcement is just a live stream of Sony offices where engineering teams are being yelled at. You could do a Casey video on that, couldn't you, actually? There's a few messages deleted. They may have been political ones, guys. Yeah, we can't have the political arguments on here. I don't want to get into that on this channel. So if that's what it was about, that's probably why your comments have been deleted. Jesse said, aside from improving the rear LCD screen, perhaps high megapixel recording models would be nice for editing in post. Yeah, and like I said, if you start to edit the A7R4, it's incredible, how much you can zoom those in and the things you can do with those high megapixels, that's for sure. I still have to do that review yet. Trev said 8K TVs are 2,500 to 10K. Don't think there's any 8K content, though. Aaron's just saying hi to Oreo. Hi, Oreo. Good to see you were in here. Yuki said, in 10 years, 8Ks will be normal. Yep, they will. That's for sure. Casper said, I think it will be years before someone gets to any camera, before the supplies get to any camera manufacturer. The problem is, though, if they've started production, they can just sit on the inventory stock while they have it depreciate. Good point. Gilbert says, I'm worried about the stores. Will they survive? It's going to be tough. Like I said last week, I think, or one of the lives that I did early on, that a lot of companies are now closing down. The unfortunate thing is, a lot of people are now going to realise, a lot of companies are going to realise that you can do a very, very good with online. I notice a lot of stores here in Australia are promoting how much growth they've had with their online sales. So I think the unfortunate side of this is that the retail, the hardware side of things, like the actual stores, may suffer in the long term and people may just decide to end up buying online. It's a horrible thing about it, and I certainly hope that doesn't happen. But it may be that is the future, yeah. Unfortunately, Gilbert, I'm worried about them as well. Mike said, given market conditions, he's surprised that Canon keep posting about that. Yeah, it is interesting. Or where were we? Gerald said, the US Congress today has put a new set of these small businesses loans, and Ruth Chris and other big companies today have now given back. Okay, so they've given them back. Well, that's good. So they should. Ruth Chris is a restaurant. Oh, okay. Leslie said, go for christenings in late December. We'll be very busy. Yeah, probably will be with everyone stuck at home, that's for sure. Altric said, one of my batch just told me he was giving up photography and going in another direction. Yeah, it might be interesting to see how many people do that, though, Altric. The fund was recently refunded again. They said they'll target small businesses. Yeah, and that's true. That's what they should be doing, that's for sure. Altric said the funds passed today. Well, that's good. Carl said, you have to set money aside for rainy days, be prepared. Yeah, we all do, but it can run out fairly fast if you have multiple bills, and it just dies from day one, though, Carl. I agree, though. It is good to have some savings there. Good idea, David, on the depression thing. Hero says, I'm waiting on that 2,000 a month to pass. Oreo said, my business has been zeroed also, but I only got €600 from the government so far. I had to close down my studio. Yeah, it's terrible. I mean, how many people in different areas of the world are going to have that same issue, Oreo? It's awful. If you're not getting supported by your government, it's really bad. We're lucky here in Australia that we are. Aaron said, I'll buy it if I stay with Sony. The Panda said, you had to add that, David. I'm not sure what that was. Altric said, I'm glad I had a full-time job, but I'm out of work now. but I'm sure we will go back to work because I work from a school system. Yeah, I know that you drive the buses, Altric, don't you? Brett said, photography is part of the arts, which will be a big loss. Yeah, arts always suffer. Whenever anything like this happens, it's always art that does suffer. I agree with you. Aaron said, but I am camera bound, I think. So you're thinking about getting that one, Aaron? I don't blame you if that's what you're thinking about, that's for sure. Jeff said, Carl, sadly some industries are looking at rainy days that may last for a year or more. Yep. I think it's going to last a long time. We're looking at seeing it in other countries where they're opening up again and then they get a second wave, which causes more harm than the first wave. Singapore is a perfect example of that. Singapore had very low numbers and then they relaxed it and now it's spiking. So you've got to be very careful. I think Sweden also have an issue. Trevor said, camera companies that don't have easy financing for their gear would be wise to look into it. Yeah, good point. And simply allow people to finance new cameras over 12 to 24 months with little or no interest. Yeah, that is a great idea. Maybe food photography. Gilbert says, Oreo, I feel for you. I have a studio sat empty, yet I still have to pay the rent. I know, I feel for you, Gilbert. I'm so lucky that my studio is in my home. That's why I moved, because I had a massive home. That's why when I had that massive home, I sold up and I bought an established home and I built this studio. I used everything really I had left, the cash to pay for this. But in the end, it's a blessing because now I don't have to at least pay for that side of it. Anyone that's paying rent for a studio and things like that, I feel for you so badly because it's awful. Hopefully, things pick up soon. I don't think it's going to be for a while though. Oreo said, the worst part, Jim, is that our wedding season would have just begun now. So by now, this means that I'll be out of work for at least 12 months. Yep. Jim said, we will come back. I'm sure we will. We will come out of it. It's not going to be easy, but we will. Like I said, we just have to help each other. The Affinity apps are only $25 right now. I bought Photo. It just has some interesting raw profile lens profiles. They're what Aaron uses as well. He loves those programs. What else have we got? Oreo said, the problem is that the economy was already struggling before the COVID. Weddings were basically the only photography business that could pay the rent. And I think that is one of the big issues too, that, well, it's like where most of my money comes from. I'm always honest with you guys. Most of my money comes from weddings. I do get some from dancers as well. Well, they've stopped as well. But most of the income that I get is from weddings. Yeah, and it's gone. Looks like a great lens from Samyang, Gilbert said. Yes, it does. Altric said, cool effects, David. What was that about, Altric? I'm not sure. Oreo said, yes, arts are the most badly struck by the tiny thing. I hope this will end soon and that you'll be able to get a lot of weddings to shoot and stay creative. Well, I've mentioned it a few times in saying the photography, videography school, Gerald, is there. Remember, you can join that. The link will be down below if you did want to join our Facebook group, guys. It's a really great group. Any idea what the price would be for the Canon? I'm picking $4,000 US. I'm picking 3,500 to 4,000. A lot of you others are saying dearer, but that's what I'm picking it to be. Altric said, I believe Sony will drop the a7 IV. Let's hope so. Jim put the link to the Facebook group there. Where was that? Oh, there. He did put the link to the Facebook group there. I'm in web design business as well and maintaining e-commerce. CJ Andrews said, David, do you think it's worth it to upgrade from the a7 III to the A9? Well, yeah, I'd say yes for me. Yes, definitely. I love my A9. I love that way more than the a7 III. As long as it's not going to cost you too much money to do that, and you have a need for those features like the 20 frames per second, the tracking, things like that, the silent shutter, having that ability to go to 132 thousandths of a shutter speed. So yeah, I do. Yes, if you've got the money, I would do that in a heartbeat. I would sell my a7 III, but I would not sell my A9. Oreo said, I am lured by the Samyang 75 as well. Luckily, I can't afford it now, so I'm not tempted to buy it. Mark said, the Sony announcement could be a PlayStation. That's what the angry photographer would say. What else have we got? Altric said, did you get the Godox 300? Yes, he did. Also, Jerry's got his. Now he's saying he's really happy with it. Jerry said this morning he put a whole comment about it in the photography videography school to say how happy he is with it. So I know Ike also has it, but he said he hasn't taken it out of the box. So Ike will obviously review that soon on his YouTube channel. But Jerry, if you want to ask about it, was in the photography videography school talking about it, and he loved it. So it's great news. What else we've got? CJ Andrew says weddings, not sports. Is that relating to the A9? I can't remember. Yeah, I would still get the A9. Yes, definitely, just for the silent shutter alone. Just seeing what else we've got there. Casper said, I went to buy a battery charger for my car and thought, does anyone make battery chargers in the USA? No, I don't think we do. We definitely need to address that, and I spoke about that before. We all need to bring manufacturing back to our own countries, guys. We really do. Jim said he's fortunate he's on Social Security and Veterans Disability. Well, you deserve that, Jim, because you served your time. Jerry said that, yeah, a few people have already got their 8300 Pro, so that's great. Bill said, I don't need to switch to any brand. I have 4 Canon cameras, 4 Fujifilm cameras, and 4 Sony cameras. Wow. Yes, Altric, he did test it, and he loved it. Bill also has 2 Pentax cameras as well. Michelle said, it wouldn't surprise me. An Apple engineer I was watching on YouTube said that R&D development has many teams, with some teams being many years into the future. Yeah, that's true, because they do develop these things way in advance. Like often, 5 to 10 years in advance, these things are sort of thinking about. So the technology that we're seeing released now was actually developed years ago. So that it is an interesting point. Aaron said, in all honesty, I'll stay with Sony. Oh, okay. Altric said on your screen, are you talking about the... Oh, okay, you're talking about the things that swipe through, are you? Yeah. Jill says, hopefully I can get a model to come outside tomorrow so I can play with mine. Bill said, and I want to add more lenses as well. Brett said, glad I have a home studio and not paying for rent. I'm exactly the same, Brett, too. I'm so glad I've got that. Casper said, is LumaFusion worth the money? Yeah, Aaron has got some great stuff on LumaFusion. Check his channel out, his YouTube channel. He's got some really good stuff about that. Mark said, might go into deep sea diving. Talk about doing my head in. Ethan said, I'm a wedding videographer and my whole 2020 will be rescheduled to 2021. Can't wait to get my hands on the R5 though. Yeah, I don't blame you. I wouldn't be able to wait to get my hands on that either. Gilbert said, look forward to see what you do in the test. Thanks for the great show, Grandpa, Jim said. Altric said on the screen, yeah, that's those swipey things that I bring up. Leslie said, I have to go. Catch you next week. Catch you, Leslie. We're just about finished here now anyway. When's the Sony announcement? It's meant to be the 30th. It's meant to be coming up. Tyrone says, R6 will be worth a look as well. It will be. The R6 is going to be a dumbed-down version of the R5 by the look of it. It probably looks like it's going to shoot 4K 60 and 4K 120. So it looks like that's going to be a great camera. Bruno said... the R5 announced for 4K. Sony announces the a7 IV with 4K 60 for 3K. Then Canon announces the R6 4K 60 for 2.5 and destroys Sony. RF lenses are gorgeous. It is going to be interesting to see what happens in that whole marketplace, though. The interesting thing is there that, well, Sony, remember too, could release two things. They could release an a7S III, and they could also release an a7 IV. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. We probably know now that Canon are also going to have the R5 and the R6. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see what happens and what's Nikon going to do as well. So they are really interesting things that we've got in that regard as well. Gerald said, Jared Poling is saying today Canon has hinted that the price will be under 4,000 United States dollars for the R5. Who will want a 6,000 EOS 1D Mark IV after that? Sports shooters, Gerald. Look, Canon did say that they were targeting that totally at sports shooters. So I think, remember, it does say that it's going to do 20 frames per second, but we don't know what the rolling shutter or anything is going to be like in that camera. It's not going to be anywhere near probably as usable for shooting that type of action as what the 1DX Mark IV will be. So there's still going to be room for that. And remember, those photographers are using those massive lenses and things like that are going to be built up. The EOS 1DX is going to be a totally different machine. So I think there probably still will be a market for it. Sports photographers aren't going to buy an R5. They want that robust body. They want the weather sealing. They want everything about that camera's released. That's why the D6 is also so popular amongst sport shooters. They're a different breed, those cameras. Canon probably brought out that camera knowing that was, and they admitted it. They said that was probably going to be the last of their digital SLR line. They may bring out a couple of small bodies, but they've said before the future now is mirrorless. Where are we? CJ said, thank you, no problem at all. I want a Sony 50 1.2. That would be amazing, wouldn't it, Aaron? I'd like a 50 1.2, an 85 1.2 though. I'd love a similar one like the Canon. If Sony could do an 85 1.2 GM, well, Tyran says he's also fortunate about being on long-term disability as well. Well, you deserve it, mate. So, if you're on disability pensions, you deserve to be on it. Hero said, is the AD300 super lightweight? Looks great. If I wasn't a ProPhoto B10 user, I would buy that light for sure. Bruno said, the R5 is the first camera that ticks all my video needs for weddings and will be able to do a great main photo too. I agree with you, Bruno. That's going to be a great wedding camera. If you do fusions like what I do, which is video and stills, that camera is going to be amazing. Jim said, Michelle McCartney related, in 1974, I was testing voice recognition software in the US Navy. Wow. Mark said, still waiting on my ATR Mini. Taken so long now. The Pro version is out. Might change the order. Yeah, I don't know if you need the Pro version, though. I suppose it's up to you if you've got the money to pay for that. I'd still just get the ATM Mini. You don't need everything that's in that. I think you're paying for stuff you're probably not even going to use. But that's just my opinion. I'd save your money and get the ATM. When weddings start up, there will be a boom in weddings, and we'll be all complaining about how much work we have. I hope you're right, Colin. My worst fear is that people think weddings are the last thing that I want to spend money on if we head into a depression, and that, we might say start to get married at home and not worry about things. There's two ways of looking at it. People are either going to say, yes, we're going to go back to like we were with weddings, or they might say we're going to go tight and not spend that money for a while. So there's two ways of looking at it. This is why I'm saying if you have a business, you have to be careful at the moment. I wouldn't rush out and be buying too much stuff at the moment unless it's needed. I'd be sort of holding off to just see what happens. Is it going to recover quickly, or is it going to take a period of time? Try and be careful just in case. I'm hoping that's the case, though. I'm hoping everyone wants to get married, though, and we all jump and go, bang, it's over. But I'm not sure that's going to be the way it will be for a while. Hero said, I hate sitting at the computer. Aaron said, he's talking to that. Yeah, Hero, bless you, brother. Gerald said, I used the 1DX and the D5 for pro sports for years, and I wished for a lighter camera with the same frames per second and mirrorless like my A9. Some sport shooters will go for the R5. I know some thinking now. Michelle said, thank you both for your service. I know exactly, you can't beat those guys that have had service. It's our day for all of our people tomorrow, for all of our veterans. We're having that tomorrow. So we're going to get up at 6 a.m. in the morning. Due to the coronavirus, it's Anzac Day tomorrow for people that aren't Australian. Anzac was a famous fight that the Australians fought in Turkey. So it's our Anzac Day tomorrow. Normally we all get up and we go down to the local RSL, which is the Service Leagues Club for veterans. And they have a priest talking, and we all light candles and all that sort of stuff. So tomorrow, all Australians are going to stand, well, I'm hoping all Australians are going to stand out in their driveway at 6 a.m. in the morning tomorrow morning. They'll play the bugle that they play, and then we can honour all of our veterans tomorrow. So it is that day for us tomorrow. So I'll certainly be thinking about all of our veterans tomorrow. So for anyone not in Australia, it's Anzac Day in Australia tomorrow. That's scary about weddings, Aaron said. Hero said, shooting at a home wedding would be awesome. Laugh out loud. Gerald said, you can't be the D5 in a lot of aspects. If you've gotten your money out of the D5, I wouldn't think of switching to another body. Shoot it until it explodes. Yep, exactly. You've spent so much money on it. Altric said, I'm thinking of buying the Sony 90 macro. It is a great lens, that one, Altric. Hero said, mine still didn't reschedule. I think they're going to be fine by July the 3rd. He's talking about buying something, I think. Jim said, thank you, Oz veterans, for your service. Yep, they'll be all thanked tomorrow, that's for sure. This is the first time we haven't had big parades for them. It's very, very big here in Australia. I ditched the 1DX and the D5 for the A9 and have never missed anything about those bloated beasts. Altric, I used the Mickey 85 2.8 macro, so sharp. What else have we got just before we finish? Broomy said, classical. The problem with the SH1 is that it's unusable autofocus, and many owners are reporting random corrupted video files. Wow. Regarding of what's recording mode and an SD card they use. Well, that's certainly not good. Classical technology. Love the color science from that camera and the 10-bit 422. That's it, guys. We're at the end of the show. Thanks so much, everyone. Please check out, I have done a review. I'd love to know your opinion. I did do a review, not yesterday, the day before. I'm going to start, well, if you think it's worthwhile, I'm going to start posting videos about photographers that inspire me. And I have put up the first one of Yervant, who's an Australian photographer. I've put up one of his where I discuss what I like about him, and I show his images and sort of go through them. So let me know whether you think that's useful or not. If you don't think it's useful, I just won't do it. But let me know whether you think it's useful and whether you find it interesting. Love to know your opinions about that. So if you do think it's useful, let me know in the comment box down below, or watch the video and let me know what you think about it. I'd love to keep doing that, but only if you guys think it's actually worthwhile doing, because everything at this stage, it does take time, and that took quite a while to do. So let me know whether you think that's useful. I have got a couple of hardware reviews coming up. I've still got that Godox light I've got to review. I've got the another monitor that was just sent to me that's pretty cool. You can use it in daylight, that I'll be reviewing for you in the coming days as well. And I've still got that ND filter review, the Tamron lens reviews I've got, and other things that I've got to review from the USA that I did. So stay tuned for those as well. So there are some things coming up. If I don't come on live before next week, I will see you next Wednesday, Australian time, Tuesday, US time and European time for the show with Aaron. So please join us in that. And apart from that, guys, I'd just like to really say thank you to the Anzacs. Really appreciate what you guys did for us. And I'll be out there at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning, guys, with my candle, honouring all of your service. Apart from that, everyone, stay safe, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye for now, guys.